On this edition of Sports Drive Live, we will talk about the Red Sox parting ways with Kevin Youkilis. We will also discuss the acquittal of Roger Clemens. Is he still guilty? LeBron James finally wins his elusive ring. Can we once and for all put his decision to take his talents to South Beach finally to rest? All that and more on this week's edition of Sports Drive Live. And welcome to this special edition of Sports Drive Live. Gershon Rabinowitz with the next 40 minutes of non-stop sports talk. Notice we're doing things a little different tonight. For instance, we're not hearing Brian and Joel. Instead of various parts of the country. So crank up the AC. Pull up a chair as we get started. The number to call, of course, is 646-649-1921. You could reach us on Twitter at Sports Drive Live or at the hashtag Sports Drive Live or on our Facebook page at Sports Drive Live. So let's get started. And the first order of business is to discuss the Kevin Youkilis trade. Of course, if you haven't heard, Kevin Youkilis was traded from the Boston Red Sox to the Chicago White Sox for Zach Stewart and Brett Lillibridge following the game on Sunday versus the Atlanta Braves. And the question about Kevin Youkilis is, how is he going to adapt in Chicago? He's been in the Red Sox organization for the past 7 years. He's going to the Chicago White Sox, and he's going, I guess, to an environment where I think he'll feel more comfortable with Robin Ventura as the manager as opposed to Bobby Valentine. His stay in Boston, for the most part, was pretty positive. He had a number of seasons where he hit over 300, was an icon for a while in Boston, helped them win the 2007 World Series, but it seemed like he's fallen out of favor as of late, especially over the last year when he's battled injuries, and we've seen what happened with the clubhouse, how it basically went in disarray at the end of last season with the beer, the fried chicken, the whole thing with Terry Francona. It seemed like he really was not in the plans of the Red Sox. Will Middlebrooks, basically at that point, Middlebrooks taking over, coming up from the minor leagues. I mean, where were you going to play Youkilis? What were you going to do? I mean, they were trying Adrian Gonzalez in right field. They were trying all these different combinations. And remember, the Red Sox have a logjam in the outfield. Of course, they have Daniel Nava out there. They have Scott Podsednik. And then they have guys on the disabled list that are supposed to come up, like Crawford and Ellsbury, who have really not played all of this season. So it just didn't seem logical anymore to have Kevin Youkilis on the Red Sox. And it was just a great moment in the Red Sox game against the Atlanta Braves when Youkilis hit that triple in the 7th inning, and then Bobby Valentine lifted him. And that was despite all the differences between Valentine and Youkilis, as you know. Remember that Valentine said back in April that Youkilis' head and his mind and just his body was not into the game of baseball anymore. And it was just great to see, if you're a Red Sox fan, that moment that Youkilis had. He's hitting over only .220 this year. You know, he's been struggling with the bat, but I mean, for the Chicago White Sox, they have gotten the worst production of any third baseman in the league. And remember that they lost Brett Morel to an injury, and now they only have Orlando Hudson and Eduardo Escobar. So they really didn't have anybody to play third base. So any production that Youkilis gives them, even if it's about the 230, 240 range, offensively, he still gets on base a ton, as you know. So he's going to get on base. He's going to get a 340, 350 on base percentage. He could really be beneficial to that Chicago White Sox offense. And Kenny Williams is going for it all in the American League Central. He's hoping that his team could emerge. The Indians have not really done that much. You have the Royals, who probably aren't going anywhere. The Tigers have underachieved. So here's the opening. And with the way the pitching is for the White Sox, why not? Jake Peavy is having a resurgence of a season for the White Sox. He's healthy for the first time in years. He's pitching like an all-star. John Danks is pitching excellent as well. You have Chris Sale, who's been one of the best young pitchers in the game, converted closer turned starter. The White Sox, they're geared. They have a bullpen that's pretty solid as well. I mean, this is their chance. And why not take a chance on a guy like Kevin Youkilis, a guy that is going to play his heart out, who does everything right for the ball club. And it seems like that he just needed that change of scenery. I mean, we saw it with the Pittsburgh Pirates when they got A.J. Burnett, that A.J. just started feeling more comfortable being in that environment and in that role, as opposed to being with the Yankees and being with that business-like mentality, and with all the pressure and the scrutiny of the New York media. He obviously couldn't handle it. And now he goes to Pittsburgh, and he's pitching extremely well. The same thing could probably happen to Youkilis going to the south side of Chicago, with the White Sox where he doesn't have to deal with that intense scrutiny of the Boston media and looking over his shoulder about Will Middlebrooks or Jose Iglesias or whoever's coming up for the Boston Red Sox. And he doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff. And I think that that's also going to help him, and maybe he might even start to improve as well offensively. With the glove, we know he's terrific with the glove. And let's take a look at the guys that the Red Sox acquired in the deal for Uke. They got Zach Stewart, who was actually one of the top prospects in the Toronto Blue Jay organization. But the Blue Jays, he fell out of favor, struggled over the last couple of years, has not really done well in the major leagues. He was traded for Edwin Jackson, and that's how he ended up with the White Sox. But his ERA has been over 6, over a small sample size. He's basically shifted from the bullpen to being a starting pitcher. And it's really been a struggle for Zach Stewart. He's a left-handed pitcher, throws pretty hard. The Red Sox are taking a chance on him because what else could they have gotten with Youkilis with his stock being way down? He has an option that's supposed to be picked up. He's making about $8-9 million, and he's really not that type of player anymore, at least over the last year and a half or so. So the Red Sox, they were in a predicament. They had to get this deal done. I guess it would also be to promote the health of the clubhouse and not have to deal with that pressure and all that tension. So they got him in that deal, Zach Stewart. Hopefully he could help them as a left-hander out of their bullpen or even in their rotation because they've had injuries. They've lost Josh Beckett, Clay Buchholz. They've been on the shelf. John Lester is underachieved. Franklin Morales is in their rotation now. And they're battling with the Blue Jays for last place. It's hard to believe that's what's going on in Red Sox Nation. The Red Sox also picked up Brent Lillibridge. For the Yankee fans, know him pretty well from last year in April of 2011 when he robbed Robinson Cano and Alex Rodriguez with 2 tremendous catches to end the ball game. And that would be, to get Brent Lillibridge, a guy that has a lot of versatility, can play the outfield and play the infield, that's a very good pickup for the Red Sox. I think that he might be one of the keys to the trade as well as Zach Stewart. Sometimes in some of these deals, you may look at it as a salary dump, but even getting like that 25th man on the roster, if that guy's going to help you in postseason, and we've seen over recent games and we've seen in the postseason about the unlikely heroes just coming up big, making plays, doing things. We've even seen it with the Yankees recently. We saw it with Dwayne Wise over the last couple of days. You don't expect it, but it happens. Sometimes you need that boost in the middle of the season or even into the postseason as guys tire. So I like the move for the Red Sox. I still don't think that they'll be able to catch New York or Tampa Bay or even Baltimore, but at least it sets them up for the future, and it gives an opportunity for Will Middlebrooks, who's really torn the cover off the ball, has had 8 home runs this season, has looked pretty strong, and it's part of that movement for the Red Sox to get younger, and also now I guess they passed the torch on to Middlebrooks. Before it was Nomar Garcia-Parra, and then he, I guess, would pass the torch on to Kevin Youkilis, because around the time that Youkilis was called up back in 2004 was around the time that Nomar Garcia-Parra was traded to the Cubs. So you had about 6 or 7 years with Garcia-Parra. Now you have about 8 years with Youkilis, and now it's to Will Middlebrooks. So what you're seeing is that the Red Sox, they have a strong farm system, and that they're still able to develop players, and we'll see where it leads them. And let's go from one former Red Sox to another, and that's Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens was found not guilty last Monday on all charges that he obstructed and lied to Congress in denying that he used performance-enhancing drugs to extend his long career as one of the greatest pitchers in baseball history. And remember, the jurors deliberated for less than 10 hours over several days. It was a 10-week trial that capped off, and they decided that he was not guilty. And I guess with the grand jury, he's exonerated, but in the court of public opinion, is he really exonerated? That's the main question regarding Clemens, because many baseball fans have seen him play, and they knew that in the second half of his career, something was up. And if you remember the statement that Dan Duquette, the general manager of the Red Sox, said in '96 when they were going to cut Clemens, he said that Clemens at this point is at the twilight of his career. And then after that, Clemens reeled off consecutive 20-win seasons. He won consecutive Cy Young Awards. He led the Yankees to a couple of world championships. And along the way with the Yankees, remember in the first year he struggled. And then the same trainer that he had in Toronto that helped his so-called resurgence, Brian McNamee, became the trainer of the Yankees. And he started to train some of the guys like Mike Stanton and Andy Pettitte and Chuck Knobloch. And if you remember that, they were on that same training regimen, but nobody was looking what exactly Clemens was doing because, I mean, he was incredibly successful. There's no doubt about that. And then he went on to Houston, and he was producing ungodly numbers. He had a 1.87 ERA, just unbelievable what he was doing. And remember that by the time he went to Houston, he was already about 42, 43 years of age. So, I mean, how do you explain it? I mean, the only guy that you see playing in the big leagues around their mid-40s, I guess, would be Jamie Moyer. That he's 49 years old. He just signed with the Blue Jays. But also remember that Moyer is not at the level of production that Roger Clemens is. Not even close to that, obviously. So it just doesn't make any sense. It's just what Clemens was putting up, and you got to wonder, did he get some sort of artificial boost? I mean, that's the main question. Did he get some sort of assistance that is beyond the realm of the Major League Baseball rulebook? And if he did, then should he be eligible for the Hall of Fame? That's one thing that's been a big debate. Roger Clemens, along with Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa, will all be on the Hall of Fame ballot coming up in 2013. And we want to hear from you. The number is 646-649-1921. And let's take a call here on Sports Drive Live. You're in the driver's seat.
Hi. I completely agree with you about Roger. That I don't think he should be in the Hall. Obviously, I mean, technically he was found innocent in the court of law, but I mean, it's obvious that he was taking something, especially towards the latter part of his career. Like you said, he was putting up like those godlike numbers in Houston, and I mean, I loved Roger because I lived through the dynasty era with the Yankees, and he was one of my favorite pitchers along with Pettit. But I mean, it's just I don't think he should be in the Hall. I mean, that goes for anybody who's suspected of or has admitted to, using PEDs.
And all you need is just some level of suspicion. That's all you need in that point. Because if you have that, then that's enough to keep a guy out of the Hall of Fame. And we've seen it in the past, and we thank you for the phone call. And it just doesn't make any sense to do otherwise. And I mean, we've seen Shoeless Joe Jackson and Pete Rose and all these guys that were suspected of cheating in some fashion. Remember that with Pete Rose, he bet on baseball as a Reds manager. Shoeless Joe Jackson was kept out of the Hall of Fame because of his involvement in the 1919 Black Sox scandal. And to this day, Shoeless Joe is not even in the Hall of Fame. And remember that Shoeless Joe Jackson was one of the top players of his era in the 1910s. Pete Rose has the most hits in Major League history. So if you're going to allow the steroid users into the Hall of Fame, you've got to allow those two in as well. And baseball has already set this precedent that they will not allow those guys in there. So why should it be any different for any guy that cheated during the steroid era? And let's look at it another way. The numbers that these guys were putting up, they were holding positions that could have gone to other players that maybe could have extended their careers or could have gave them an opportunity to enter the Hall of Fame. But the numbers, because of that, they pale in comparison to some of the ungodly ones, like we see 756 home runs from Barry Bonds, for instance, or the over 300 wins for Clemens. And the Hall of Fame voters, or the sports writers of the country, they actually agree with us because they feel that these guys should not be in the Hall. I mean, we've seen it with Mark McGwire only getting 25% of the vote at the most on his 3 to 4 years on the ballot. And what I wonder is, with these steroid users, would it allow a guy that's been on the ballot for 14, 15 years, a guy like Jack Morris, for instance, or even a guy like Mike Mussina that's going to enter the ballot, guys that do not have quite 300 wins, but they were successful for a long duration of time in baseball, do they get a chance to sniff the Hall of Fame? Or would a guy like Clemens or Bonds still get in? Because I guess there's different levels with steroid use, because a guy like Clemens or Bonds, they were going to be Hall of Famers regardless if they took steroids or not at the point that they started juicing. And we have no idea when these guys started juicing. But they would have been Hall of Famers because over the first 11 or 12 years of their career, they were head and shoulders above the competition. And this includes a guy like Alex Rodriguez as well. They were head and shoulders above every player. They were on their way to Hall of Fame credentials, and they saw what guys with lesser talent were doing, and that these guys were juicing They were skinny one year, and the next year they looked like the Incredible Hulk. And they saw that, and they felt, this guy is trying to outshine me. I'm going to take steroids as well. And Major League Baseball, remember, they were coming off the 94 strike. They needed anything to juice up ratings. And everybody was saying the balls were juiced, the ballparks were smaller, expansion was affecting it, and you were seeing numbers that were just insane. You never saw that type of offensive numbers ever. It just wasn't the way things were ever done in baseball. You saw certain years that were anomalies. 1987 was one year when McGwire hit 49 home runs, and the ball started to leave the yard at a more frequent pace. You see other years with, like 1968, that are pitchers' years, or 2012. I mean, there are certain years like that, and it depends on, I guess, the players and I guess the era that they play in. But some writers and some media people feel that these guys should still be in the Hall of Fame. Guys like I mentioned, like Bonds, Clemens, Rodriguez, that guys that are already on their way to the Hall of Fame, that they should still be in the Hall because they were already surefire Hall of Famers, and that we gotta acknowledge this era and look at the steroid era as one of the major eras in baseball, like the dead ball era, like the expansion, like any of these other eras that were in baseball, that we have to look at it the same way. And I completely disagree with it. You cheat in the game, you have no place in the Hall of Fame, and you should be banned from baseball. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter who you are. I'm one of the biggest Roger Clemens fans, but if he cheated, he should not be in the Hall of Fame. There's no question about that. And let's discuss now another guy with something to prove, and that guy is LeBron James. LeBron James, for other reasons, not for cheating reasons, obviously, he's trying to prove now that after he won his first NBA title, to see where he ranks among the top players in NBA history. LeBron James has always had that chip on his shoulder. The Miami Heat, of course, winning the NBA title last Thursday night in 5 games over the Oklahoma City Thunder. And for the first time in his 9 NBA seasons, he finally wins a title. And remember that there were so many other athletes also at the top of their sports for years were always labeled they can't win the big one. Alex Rodriguez was one with the Yankees. Peyton Manning with the Colts. And now you have it with LeBron James, and they all finally won titles. So where do you rank LeBron James? And you hear arguments over the last few days. Should they rank him higher than Kobe Bryant because Kobe had the assistance of and also the benefit of playing with Shaquille O'Neal in 4 NBA Finals and winning 3 of them? Or that LeBron James just won his first title? I think we can't judge it really because LeBron James' career is not over and Kobe Bryant's is certainly not over. And we can't compare LeBron yet to Jordan. I mean, at this stage, Jordan had 2 championships and LeBron had 1, but we have to see what the Miami Heat could do because with the team that they have in place, with the Big Three and the complementary players that want to come to Miami because of the presence of the Big Three and because of that system, LeBron might win more championships. And for the first time over the last few years, he's been to 3 NBA Finals. For the first time, LeBron James really elevated his game, scoring over 30 points in the last 5 games, playing stellar defense in these NBA Finals. Anytime Miami had to overcome adversity, they rose up to the challenge. It was a tremendous final, and it was great for LeBron James, especially facing all that scrutiny, as you know, from the decision that he had with ESPN. And just also from what he said after last year when he said, I'll go back to my mansion. It's not a big deal. Why do you guys focus so much on the game? It's not really that important. And LeBron took a lot of heat for all those comments. And it seemed like his attitude changed. And it's a completely different atmosphere for him now, winning his first title. That pressure is finally off. And the question is, who does the pressure go squarely on now? Would it be Kevin Durant in the NBA? Because Kevin Durant, he lost his first NBA Finals. Is the pressure on him to become the next superstar? And that's going to be the big question. And now LeBron James, he doesn't have to brag anymore that he won a state championship at 9 years old. But the one thing that is still left unresolved regarding LeBron is, imagine you're the fans in Cleveland. Remember that LeBron James, he played in Cleveland over the first 7 or 8 seasons prior to that ill-fated decision. The Cleveland Cavalier fans, they wanted that NBA championship, and the city of Cleveland, they have not won a title since the 60s. They thought that LeBron James was going to bring them that title, and the Cleveland front office did anything they could within the realm of reason to do that. And it just didn't work out. They got to the NBA Finals one year and lost, if you remember, to San Antonio. And just imagine how they feel. I mean, they felt jilted the day that LeBron took his talents to South Beach. Now think about the day that they win the NBA Finals in Miami. And remember that Dan Gilbert, the owner, said, and he guaranteed that that the Cleveland Cavaliers themselves would win the NBA Finals before LeBron would. So just imagine that type of feeling. Largest pains that you could probably feel if you're in sports or just as a sports fan, just seeing him celebrate and keep thinking to yourself that could have been your team. And remember that LeBron was a hometown hero. And we also have some other news, shifting gears here tonight, that today the NCAA, they announced that they're actually going to be going to a 4-team playoff format and that the BCS might not be anymore following the 2013 season. A group of 12 college presidents passed the plan for college football to have a 4-team playoff starting with the 2014 season. The BCS Presidential Oversight Committee emerged from a meeting this afternoon to announce they have adopted a playoff format that has been approved over the last week between the 11 BCS conferences. The first playoff will take place after the 2014 season. There will be 4 teams, and the semifinals will be rotated among 6 bowl games over the life of the contract, with the championship game being put up for bid. A selection committee will rank the teams based on factors including head-to-head matchups. The semifinals will be held on December 31st and January 1st. The championship game will be played on the first Monday, that is at least 6 days after the semifinal. The first playoff game of this format would be December 31st, 2014. So this ends years and years of everybody complaining about the BCS. And remember, you had a couple of years where you had 4 undefeated teams, and the 2 from the bigger conferences usually end up in the BCS title game. So I guess the semifinal game would be rotated among the current bowls, and then 2 of those teams would advance to the BCS. So you probably have 2 semifinal games in the two different bowls, and then they advance to the BCS. So it's not a perfect format. You would like to see 8 teams and have a more true playoff format, but this is better than nothing. And at least then it helps college football. College football is as popular as ever, just like any football is. And you're going to see more fans come out for this. And I think fans at TCU and Boise State, some of these smaller independent schools, they don't have to shift now to one of the Big 6 conferences. It's not as big of a deal. The only problem that you have now is you still have a selection committee and the coaches polls. And will those coaches use their biases and pick the teams from the bigger conferences? Because those Big 6 conferences in college football yield so much power, and the pay for the bowl games and the sponsorships and everything that comes with it, it's completely different, and it's incredibly subjective. And you hear so many arguments and so many debates over which team is really the true national champion because, contrary to popular belief, college football does not award their own national champion. That's why the BCS was created. They never have a true champion. They don't do it like they do in college basketball or they would in college baseball. It doesn't. The glass football is just done as a separate award for the BCS. And then you had years where certain teams got a share of the BCS title, like USC in 2004. And people get confused with the computer rankings and everything that goes with it, and it alienates certain college football fans. Hopefully the new system will not do that. And tonight I wanted to close off the show by discussing that this week is actually the 25th anniversary of the first sports talk radio station in the country, and that's WFAN in New York. And WFAN, at that time, it debuted on July 1st, 1987. It was something revolutionary because there was no sports talk radio at that time. All you had was news, sports. You even had a country music station on AM radio. I mean, that's insane. And it brought sports fans exactly what they needed, a place that they could have a forum to discuss anything that they wanted to talk about. If it wasn't for WFAN, we wouldn't even have the show here tonight. And it brought on stations like ESPN Radio and all the local radio stations that you hear in the country like WEEI and WIP in Philadelphia. And you hear all the interviews. Everything's out there for everyone to listen to. I mean, this is in the days before Twitter and Facebook, and also you would have the updates, different updates every 20 minutes on different scores and stuff, and you didn't have your phones back then to look it up, remember? So, and SportsCenter was just starting out. There wasn't that many local sports stations out there. And for the first time, you had a place where you could get your scores and you could hear your sports talk radio and hear everything that's going on and be caught up with your teams. And it's something to do on your way to work. And it became a format that just caught on. And so this week, at the end of the week, WFAN, they're celebrating their 25th anniversary. And that station launched the careers of so many different people that got their start there. Guys like Greg Gumbel, Mike Breen, Dave Sims, who's the Mariners broadcaster, Ian Eagle. All those different guys began their careers at WFAN, honing their talents. Also, Howie Rose, the Mets radio broadcaster. And all those different guys were able to get their starts there. And it changed the way that we looked at sports. Just like ESPN did, that's what WFAN did. And for those of you who are listening who do not live in New York, download one of the apps like TuneIn Radio or uTunes if you can, and listen to the Fan starting on Friday with the Mike Francesa show. That was one of the big shows that was on. Mike Francesa and Chris Russo hosted Mike and the Mad Dog. That became the most popular sports talk radio show of all time. And that probably revolutionized WFAN. And if you listen to Francesa on Friday, they're going to discuss everything that went on in the 25 years of WFAN. Also, some former radio hosts, some of them that I mentioned about, will actually be on Sunday shows because that's at the actual 25th anniversary of the Fan. And it was just a completely different time in 1987 when that debuted. And it's hard to believe that there wasn't sports talk radio at that time. Today, you have everything at your fingertips. You go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, you get messages instantly. A guy pitches a perfect game. A guy's going for a no-hitter. A guy gets injured. You get it instantly. It just happens. But at that time, you didn't have it. In WFAN and sports talk radio, that's what you had at that time. And today, it still resonates today. And it's something that people enjoy and that people listen to. And it brightens up their day. It's just something that you could turn to and count on. And it's just an amazing feeling to listen to that and enjoy it. And I just want to end off this show discussing next week's show. So next week we're actually going to have All-Star Night in America. Brian's going to return. And on that night we're going to discuss all the All-Stars, look at the midseason report in Major League Baseball, and discuss how things are going to turn out in the game of baseball, surprises, snubs, anything that's on your mind. Remember, throughout the week, you guys could tune in